unknown individual. They gave the tracking number SIL, which stands for Central Identification Lab 2020. That's the year. It was actually latter part of 2019, early part of 2020 that he made it to the lab. 144 was the Julian date. I for individual, and then 01, it was one container. Oftentimes, if we have an air crew loss, that number might be 01 to 09, 10. And then identified on the 24th of January of this year. You didn't answer the call, but your son did.
But Austin did.
That number kept coming up on my phone, well, several times. It's some town in Kentucky, and I told Wayne, I said, I don't know anybody in Kentucky. I don't think I'm going to answer it. And finally, Austin.
Yeah, this was Austin.
He's the one that called, and he said, Mom, they found Bud.
I
And
remember.
then I felt really bad, and I called her
Okay.
right back
Yeah, you did.
that day,
I'm
and
quiet right now.
I couldn't believe it.
The main thing is that we were able to talk, so I was grateful. We talked the same day at least. So prior to World War II, our presence in the Philippines was extremely minimal. We had, of course, some of the field artillery regiments already established there. By early 1940, we were starting to establish the material squadrons, which would be a part of those early Army Air Corps teams. We knew, our relationship with Japan had always been fragile. From early century, Japan wanted expansion. We kind of had a gentleman's handshake that they would just keep the status quo, keep things civil. But with time, it just was, kind of simmering with a closed lid, and eventually it would just grow into their expansion. They would deploy in 1937 to China and be at war with China from that point as part of the Sino-Japanese War from 1937 all the way through the end of World War II. So we knew that we need to establish a larger presence in the Pacific. By early 1940s, we have a new Hickam Airfield. So we're starting to establish this major defensive, not only Army, Air Corps, Marines, Navy there at Pearl Harbor. And Hawaii is going to be the central hub of all things defense in the Pacific region. We were starting to build our presence in the Philippines. We thought that we had more time. By summer of 1941, we have pilots that are finishing their training in San Antonio, getting ready to deploy to the Philippines. We didn't even have very many planes that were established there. So really all that we have are ground troops by 1941. So unfortunately, things would change pretty drastically and extremely quick. Yeah. We didn't see it coming. We knew it was coming. We didn't expect it to come that quickly. So the 59th Field Artillery Regiment is part of the harbor defense there in Manila and the Subic Bay, which was just off of the Bataan Peninsula. And they're going to be stationed at Fort Mills on the island of Corregidor. So it's so small that it's hard to see. I've got another map that I'll show you in the coming slides. They had roughly 1,300 personnel that were stationed there at Fort Mills. We know that Irwin is going to get there by summer of 1941. There really wasn't that much time from him enlisting, before he's literally going overseas. While hostilities were increasing with Japan, most likely it's this tropical paradise for the most part, similar to getting an assignment to Hawaii. He probably thought, I got it made. This is going to be a great assignment. And I've seen letters home to family where they just describe it as being the most magical place on the planet. You know, Mai Tais and time on the beach. Yes.
I have a letter, the only one I've seen that he wrote to my grandma, and he said they had gotten there, and when the ship came in, they had planes that flew over and bands that played.
Yeah.
And then over on the other side of the page, he said, the most exciting thing is now that we sleep in tents. And
Must have been pretty basic.
It
when they
was-
got there.
yeah, it was.
It was extremely
It was going to
basic.
be okay, he thought.
Yeah. But with a climate like that, you know, where literally every day is summer, for me it would be too hot. But from a guy from Nebraska,
yeah.
leaving winter, I think he probably thought he had it made, even if he was sleeping in a tent.
And there was 4 guys from Plymouth that went, but the one man that helped me get the stone, and he said his father had taken these 3 guys to the train station that day, and they didn't come back. No, I take that back. One of them came back. Harlan Wannenberg came back. And then I have a copy of the talk that he gave to the Legion. It was on Veterans Day, about 1990 or somewhere back in there. And the talk that he gave, and he told all about how they were treated here, and I have a copy of that.
Wow.
They were treated very well, as far as I could see. I mean, the Philippine government just welcomed us with open arms.
Well, once they were taken over, and
Yeah,
You're talking about prison
from the
life.
occupation onward,
Yeah.
it's hard.
at first they were,
Mhm.
and then, well, I don't think they treated them
They did not.
any better.
They
Probably
did
worse
not.
than us, but that's the only letter I've seen from him. But I thought that's really cool. I'm glad I found that.
I find that most survivors, they just can't talk about, and quite frankly, it's hard for me to talk about. What I've read, any history of Japanese occupation is just like nothing that we know. Now, in anticipation for, Japan's hostilities, they would actually convert portions of the 59th Field Artillery to man these anti-aircraft defense guns. And so he would have been trained to be a part of that mission. Their own Corregidor. That was basically all they had was anti-aircraft artillery. So he played a significant role, ultimately, from the time that they actually started bombing the island. Now, on the 7th of December at Pearl Harbor, we know the history. It literally came out of nowhere. Suddenly, the island's in flames. And ultimately, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning in Manila. Within a couple of hours, the same that came to Pearl Harbor came to the Philippines. Because communication was extremely slow. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. Nobody knows that this is going to happen. Going back to, we know that hostilities are increasing, but that it was going to be in the middle of the night under those circumstances, it was pretty drastic. We were not able to really get planes in the air to fight back. Ultimately, after 30 minutes, buildings are ablaze. There's really not much left, and from that point forward, it would just be a constant move towards Japanese occupation. The island where Irwin was, they weren't immediately impacted, and because on that island, they're defending the coast. They're based in the Manila Bay, so they've got all of the equipment to, really play a role in the air defense. So they were actually able to shoot down some of the Japanese bombers, and so he would have played a significant role. To me, that gives me a lot of comfort, knowing that he was making a difference that day, because things were moving so quickly. Between the 29th of December and then into January, finally the island of Corregidor would be bombed. So there were a few days, about a week actually, that things were not so intense on the island as they were on the mainland. So they were able to play a significant role in the defense. But by the end of the month and into the next year, that would change. They as well would be under pretty severe attack. The Japanese would take out all the vegetation around, the anti-aircraft machine guns, so they were exposed, and then it would be a pretty quick descent from there. By January, towards the end of the month, the Japanese had complete air supremacy, but because they were so spread thin, by that point, it wasn't just that they attacked Pearl Harbor. They had attacked the Philippines, Guam. They were at war with China. They were spread so thin, from ground troops, to air. They would ultimately have to wait for some reinforcements. So there would be a couple of months where things were calmer, let's say. Troops weren't advancing that quickly while they were waiting on reinforcements. In the month of January, historically, we see that their rations went down to about half of what they were previously. But pretty significant for me, it was like 3, almost 4 months, that they were able to hold off Japanese advancement between the Filipino army and our American troops. Significant. They would ultimately condense all of the outlying positions, all of the outlying bases would consolidate on the Bataan to establish that defensive posture. There's no food, there's no supplies. I believe very certainly that those troops believe that we as well would have reinforcements coming. So the whole intention of moving to Bataan on the peninsula is we just have to wait it out, reduce the rations. Everybody's together in this defensive posture. At a certain point, we're going to have our own reinforcements come, and everything will be okay. And unfortunately, that just wouldn't happen. Months would pass. By March, they're down to a quarter of the rations, eating about 1,000 calories a day. I've seen letters home where a service member, in this particular case, he was comical, I guess, because there was nothing else he could do. He told his family that the food was great. We have fish and rice for breakfast, rice and fish for dinner. I'm sure at a certain point it was just rice, and that was all that they were getting by on. So with poor diets and no vitamins, we start to see, night blindness, malaria, dengue fever, tropical environment. So it's, always warm climate, dysentery, and then ultimately jaundice. They are literally, by March and into April, they're starving. They're without a doubt broken men. In March 1942, the Japanese air raids continue, and by that point, they're advancing on Bataan from every possible angle. And you can see their movement in the red arrows there. They're literally coming from everywhere. By that point, we're condensed on the Bataan Peninsula. We'd kind of taken our last possible stance for being able to defend our position. But by the 9th of April, we see that the General Edward King of the U.S. Army forces in the Far East, who had control of both the U.S. and the Filipino troops, Filipino army and scouts, he would surrender on the 9th of April. Very, very early on is where we see the 65-mile, 11-day Bataan Death March begin. So they had kind of temporary at those early days camps established. It wouldn't immediately be Cabanatuan where they were moved to. There were at least a couple of temporary camps. But being that Irwin was on the island of Corregidor, they were kind of safe for another month. It wouldn't be until the 5th of May, and that evening, that the Japanese actually landed, had boots on ground, that island. So from the 5th and on to the 6th, he was a part of the troops that were destroying all the records, making sure that the Japanese had no intelligence that they could obtain. And then on the 6th, they as well became POWs. Hard to really understand how the troops that were on the island had more supplies as they were, collaborating or moving towards the POW camps. They actually still had food that they were able to share amongst the troops. I'm not sure exactly, I haven't found any record that states why the island had more supplies than anywhere else on Bataan, but they did. By late summer, he was officially a POW at Cabanatuan. This top map kind of shows the route that they took. They marched up into the town of San Fernando, where they got on a rail. The circumstances of actually getting on the rail carts was just horrible. Hundreds of people crammed into, it's summer, it's extremely hot. The Japanese were masters of making it seem like their prisoners were nothing, absolutely nothing. So 25 miles via train up to the town of Capas, and then they made them walk an additional 9 miles to actually get to the camps. Very little food once they were actually established there at Cabanatuan. Even less food, and anything that they had, they grew themselves. So they ate things like eggplant, okra, something called pigweed, which is literally just a weed, that grows in that climate. No nutrition whatsoever. Between 1942 and 1943, there were about 6,000 POWs, U.S. POWs specific. And if we look at the first 6 months of them being in that encampment, we lost about 1,500 people. If they were there by the summer of 1942, the month of July, there were almost 1,000 that died within that first month. And I don't know if that's a blessing, considering what would come later, where the POWs were placed on sometimes permanent duties where they were taken from the island. For lack of a better word, it was slave labor. Oftentimes sent back to Japan, where they would do the work that the Japanese didn't want to do. Just extremely harsh circumstances. The camp records, very minimal records, but they indicate that he actually entered the camp hospital suffering from beriberi and dysentery on the 14th of October 1942. So lack of thiamine, because they ate so much rice, he was deficient, and that would be the beriberi. And then of course dysentery, the intestinal issues, almost impossible to recover from under those conditions. So the record shows that he passed away on the 1st of January 1943 at around 8 o'clock that evening. They, didn't always keep that specific of records. I don't think that they were entitled to. Sometimes it's a matter of recreating because maybe you have a medic or a doctor, was trained as a doctor in the Army, and they put together the records. But the Japanese just didn't allow those types of records to begin with, or when they're actually buried. In this case, he was buried in a common grave, believed to be 822, just based on the date that he died, the 1st of January. Those common graves were determined by, who dies within a 24-hour period are going to go into that particular grave. So when we were actually going back to look at any not records, but evidence that showed what their burial practices were, or talking to those that survived, we believed it had to be definite that he was buried in common grave 822. So for years, the War Department would, do the research based on that particular common grave. There were four individuals total that were in that grave, and that's actually one of the smallest. We typically see between 30 individuals. I've seen as large as 48.
That's what I thought he would have been in.
And if, it's the fact that they even attempted in the 50s to make sense of all of that with no forensic testing is just really, 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 really hard to believe. But they tried. The 3rd of March, 1945 is officially when the Battle of Manila ends, and then their unconditional surrender on the 15th of August, 1945. For a lot of the POWs that actually survived and made it into 1945, the Japanese, you may have heard about the hell ships. So because the conditions were so harsh in the Philippines, they wanted some leverage with their surrender, and so they started moving the POWs back to Japan, or to Japan, and we lost thousands of service members on what they called hell ships. Either they, because of disease didn't make it, or the Japanese did not identify the ships as being POW carriers, and we, friendly fire, bombed those ships. So you survive all of those harsh circumstances, and then you die under friendly fire because the Japanese just were so, it's hard for me to imagine, really. Now, in making sense of everything that had occurred, the War Department established the American Graves Registration Service. So post-war, where they're actually accounting for all of those missing and killed in action, with the intention of making an identification, so they actually start to evaluate and make sense of the common graves. And when they're able to ID the service members, they will return them to the families. Families had the option either to repatriate or to inter them at the Manila American Cemetery. So we still have hundreds of service members that are identified, and the families chose for them to remain buried there in the Philippines. In December of 1945, we would go to the Manila American Cemetery, Cemetery number 2, and start the disinterment. Between December of 45 and March of 1946, there were almost 1,000 that were identified with those disinterments. For those that were not able to be identified, then we would establish an X file for them, which was typically an X followed by a number followed by the cemetery name. And oftentimes in Europe, you see the name of the cemetery would change quite a lot. Manila, there was just the one cemetery overseas. They would return in 1947 and 1948 to continue, but things would ultimately be so complex that they would have to end the disinterments in 1951. Common Grave 822, those 4 service members, again believing that Irwin was a part of that common grave. We would later see that there was another individual who was buried in a common grave nearby, Common Grave 836, that died on the 1st of January too. So what you thought was their practice is suddenly not, and it would just becomes more and more complicated. There were 6 sets of remains, and 2 of those individuals died on the 1st of January that were part of Common Grave 836. There's no evidence that shows the graves registration teams actually tried to compare those common graves and try to make sense of that. By 1951, this project was so complicated, they just couldn't proceed. They would establish an office in DC, an office in Manila, with the sole purpose of doing as much testing as they could to lead to an identification. But with remains that have been moved at least a couple of times, they're jumbled together, it was just too large of a project for those days. They attempted to have a group identification of Common Grave 822, and it actually shows, they speak to Irwin's name in particular. The statement of the investigation a copy of the Cabanatuan POW camp death report revealed that the dissidents that were interred in the Common Grave 822, one of them was actually buried in a separate common grave that also died on the 1st of January. The disinterment of grave 822, POW cemetery, were 4 unknown individuals. Private First Class Alan Wood was believed to be interred in Common Grave 822, but ultimately was identified from Common Grave 836. 836 was literally 1 row over, to the right, so close. It's concluded, therefore, that since the discrepancies are noted in the recording of burials at the Cabanatuan POW Camp Cemetery, the effects of the Japanese to obliterate all American handiwork, which means anything that the prisoners tried to establish as identifying markers for the cemetery or for the graves, the Japanese just completely obliterated those. Believe that the natural disintegration under tropical conditions has completely ruined the reliable means of identification. So when we would travel back to the cemetery in the early 50s, late 40s, it was completely underwater. The locals would ultimately use that area as a rice paddy. So with those conditions, the remains, potentially shifting and furthermore combining with other graves. So that makes Irwin's case extremely difficult. Based on date, believed to be 1 common grave, but the common grave nearby has service members that died on the same day. The Cabanatuan project would ultimately, in 1951, cease. They were not helping the situation by any means. They were actually complicating it, and we're still today trying to work through misidentifications based on that project. They literally did the best that they could under those circumstances. The intention to identify and return service members home. So in modern day, you know, when we started looking at the Cabanatuan project, we knew that there were misidentifications, you know, extensive. And with time, that number just grew and grew. We knew that with misidentifications over the years, some of them were corrected, most of them were not. You know, I'm still today working with families to disinter graves here in the U.S. because we have remains that were identified in the 40s as that service member, but we have those same remains that were DNA tested confirmed to be the service member. So there's, you know, remains in the grave, but those same remains, bones rather, are in the lab. So families in those cases have to completely agree. If they were to tell us no, then it's a closed story. You know, we'll definitely honor their wishes. But oftentimes with the disinterment, you know, it might be 2 or 3 individuals that's actually in that grave, and so it ends up being a bigger thing. We end up ultimately identifying additional service members in those cases. So as they were trying to establish the boundaries, you know, just making sense of how they would proceed with a large-scale project or disinterment, it was extremely difficult to actually establish those perimeters. In August of 2014, they believed that they had enough information to disinter 10. So they started small in 2014. It wasn't Common Grave 822 or 836, but at least a way for them to proceed and really start to set those perimeters and make sense of things so that they could continue. They would ultimately disinter about 900 graves, have to get DNA from 900 families for this large-scale project. By 2019, early 2020, Common Grave 822 and 836 were disinterred, and those remains were taken to the lab for testing. He would ultimately be a part of Common Grave 836. And then it's not a quick process, you know. From the time we have remains in the lab, they're there as unknowns, and you know the anthropologists are basically working in the blind just to gather data on the remains that we could later compare to a service member's record. So it wouldn't be until January 2025 or 5 years later that he was actually identified. I want to switch gears. Is everybody okay with seeing skeletal remains? It's pretty neat. Now it's a partial skeleton. It's not a full skeleton, which is pretty characteristic for the Philippines.
Ma'am, is this a copy?
It's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
So they would ultimately test elements. They didn't take DNA from every single bone. They were able to identify that it was one individual through the mitochondrial DNA testing of each bone. They shared the same sequencing, and ultimately there's no duplication. Everything articulated, everything fit back together as it should. They determined that it was a male individual by assessing the skull. It was a 99.9% probability that it was a male individual. Now, in the cases of Cabanatuan, I typically see, you know, maybe a fragment of a bone. This is as significant as I've seen yet. Yeah.
A lot more than I thought there would be, actually.
Yeah.
Like I said, this is the most that I've ever seen from Cabanatuan.
I would have guessed maybe just a finger or
Right.
something.
Right. Maybe a lower jaw. That's typically what I see, a fragment of a bone. There are a couple places here you can see these little notches taken out, and that's where they did the DNA testing. So that was intentional. Pretty neat. They determined the age to be at least 18 years old, so late adolescent, early adult individual, primarily by evaluating the root formation of his tooth 32, which is a wisdom tooth. Believed to be of European descent, but that was indeterminate. Primarily, they evaluated his jaw for that. There was one record that shows he had an infection of his left tibia, which matched the remains. Overall, the remains were in good condition, considering the soil conditions that they were in for so long.
I'm surprised they found anything.
There's dental remains as well. There are 17 articulated teeth. 6 of them are loose. 2 were closed sockets. 2 were open sockets, so they were lost just prior to him dying, or at least the time of his death. And then 4 were closed sockets. So when we evaluate the actual record, I think a table kind of speaks for itself. We've got, the remains as an unknown compared to his dental record. The only discrepancies are explainable ones, and they're kind of typical, because he had teeth that he had to have fillings in between him leaving the U.S. and going to Philippines. He probably spent some time in California. I don't actually have that record of where he was stationed, but we typically see it was first in Southern California before going to San Francisco area, getting on a boat to go overseas. So he definitely had some work done on the teeth that they had not updated the charts. And then there are 2 teeth that are believed to just be mischarted. His tooth 15 is charted as being missing, but it's there, and tooth 16 is the opposite. So most likely that is the case. There are isotope in order to actually determine that it's an American or a U.S. individual. So the results showed, I think it was 96% likelihood that it was an American, 95% by testing several bones to determine the origin. And that as well, by doing the isotope testing, they're able to identify it to one individual. In cases of the Philippines, we might have women that could be a part of those graves, local Filipino soldiers that could be a part of those graves. So the isotope testing would be a significant part for determining just the U.S. origin. The DNA results. So they tested about 7 bones, mitochondrial DNA testing, so testing the maternal lines. The remains compared to John Mueller, consistent at all 16,462 overlapping bases. All in all, 574 times likely that they are family members. And when you look at the actual results, so a little complicated to read mitochondrial DNA results. Now these are called base pairs, and everything on this side are those of Irwin, And these are John's results. And typically you want to see at least one of those pairs, one base is shared amongst family members. But within the perimeters of their testing, they're exactly the same. So we're looking at all of these pieces of evidence, and
Wow.
everything points to this is without a doubt Irwin. It's pretty neat. Now, on a monthly basis, each of these individual departments, the historian, the anthropologist, the DNA team, each of them will meet with our Armed Forces medical examiner, who ultimately, she is the only person that can say, yes, this is an identification in the service member's name. And she provides what's called a medical examiner's summary report. So this report at the front of the book summarizes everything that we've talked about today. And she will provide her opinion. And I just want to read that for you. She says the laboratory analysis and the totality of the circumstantial evidence available established the remains as those of Private Irwin H. Schulp, service number 170-12216, U.S. Army. And she will also provide a death certificate. Not, something that we get from the local health department death certificate, but certainly something we can use with the funeral home to get the death permit or to burial permit. So it identifies his name, his rank, service number, his date of birth, his race, and then identifies him as dying from complications while in captivity. And this literally makes it official. It's a lot of information to take in. I'm certain of that.
Were there any articles of clothing left?
There wasn't.
Anything? Okay.
I have yet to see any from Cabana Twan. No,
There
no
we were
material
probably
evidence.
doing good bones. But
Mhm.
You ever find, or were the, did the Japanese script them of all their personal effects, like
They
dog
did.
tags, like
They
everything?
did. Yeah, it was a level of captivity that just was not very humane. I've seen several World War II era movies. What's the name of the movie? The service member was part of an air crew that went down. They were out in the ocean for several days, and then I forget the name of the movie. I'd have to
Are you
look.
talking the one that he was an Olympic athlete?
Yes.
Yeah, Unbroken? I
Unbroken.
think. Yep.
And that was that's kind of the research that I've done. That was a pretty real.
I'm not going to talk to her now.
She probably wants the scoop, huh?
Just a friend. Let's see. You wanted to know, was there any other cause of death besides beriberi?
That was it.
That was it. Okay. No scraps of clothing. To identify him as an American soldier.
Never answers my
Will his name be removed from the wall
yeah,
of
I
missing?
want to talk to
I
him.
guess that's a question that's been pretty much answered for him.
Yeah, I think
Call me.
We do.
That's hard. It's a side conversation. Never mind.
What did I miss out on?
No.
We're just talking about your phone.
oh,
We're talking about now. We know what happens when we call you.
Not now. King.
I'll call you back later.
I know.
No, you don't want to talk. No, don't go there.
is it one of those never-ending phone calls?
Yes.
Pretty much.
I do the same thing then. Don't
No,
call me.
I don't have time right now.
Yeah, exactly.
She's my friend, but I'll get back to her later.
Time and a place. Yeah, I think it's so much information and having these books
Just
to
kind
be
of
able to
overwhelming.
so let it sink in for a couple of days and
I
maybe
remember
go
you said
back.
when I talked to you, you said we know it's him.
Yeah,
Very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool.
there's no doubt.
It just blows my mind what have learned to do in just the last few years.
You and me
In
both.
identifying people.
These days, even if we have just a tooth, we have identified via tooth, one tooth.
That's kind of what I didn't think there'd be much. Were there any dog tags?
No dog tags.
No dog tags.
They took everything.
They
The
did.
Japanese.
We don't ever see with Pacific region World War II. There's never much material evidence like that, unless it's a plane that goes down. The Japanese didn't get to the plane; they took everything.
I'm thinking one of those other guys from Plymouth was on one of those ships that was headed for Japan, and it went down.
On one of the hell ships. I have I'm leaving here this afternoon and going to Tacoma, Washington, where I'm meeting with a Korean War family. But then I was supposed to on Wednesday be in Canada and meeting with a service member from one of the hell ships prisoners. So he was being transported to Japan when the ship was bombed, and meeting with his son. He didn't make it. He died. He died on the ship. There were thousands that would ultimately be lost on those transport ships. But
And they found his remains in the ocean.
they did.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's incredible.
Wow.
At post-war, they found the remains and were buried as an unknown.
Well, we were lucky. Blessed, whatever you call it.
I consider it such.
I didn't think there would be nearly that
Yeah, that's a lot.
much left.
Yeah.
I'm going to take out my demonstration item. I'm going to show you a picture. And if you don't mind, I'm going to transition to a couple of documents for us to go over. So we're going to start talking about the Plymouth side of things. Making that official. I'm going to leave these here with you all.
So John's DNA is what really identified it.
It is. It is.
He'll be so happy to hear that.
He gave his DNA March of 2017.
I know he said he gave them some, but I didn't know when.
I mean, that alone, that we reach out to the family, the Army, the service reaches out to the family for that DNA. Oftentimes because we know that DPA is working on disinterment of whatever graves. So we know that we need to determine the family that can provide DNA and then reach out to request the DNA. But that alone, I mean, the fact that families answer that call, some think it's a scam. Some think we have to go to great lengths.
And somebody's got to track those people down. And
Yeah.
I know my sister gave some. She and John. So that's cool.
Grateful for John.
Would you like to take a break, ma'am? Are you okay? Do you want us to give you a moment?
I'm just kind of overwhelmed.
It's a lot of information. It's a lot.
Yeah, I don't.
It's very common. It'll take you a couple of days, I think. For it
I'll
sinks
probably wake
in.
up in the night thinking about all of this again. Now, what do they say about this? I'll probably have to go back and listen.
Well, and if you do have that and you have any questions, that's part of what I'm here for. Is I'll be here to assist with any questions you have, and so if I have copies of these documents as well, and so if you're visiting, if you're visiting with your son in California when he gets done teaching this evening,
We will.
and you have a question, give me a call, and and I'll get you an answer or help remind you. Or if I don't have the answer, my next call will be to Tamala, and we'll get it answered for you. But that's part of my job. Is just it's a lot to keep straight, and if I can help in some way, just with some of the documentation, and that's what I'm here to do. So just give me a call if you have any questions at all.
Thank you.
Of course.
Definite team effort. Shall we proceed?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, now this first form, I'm going to give you I'm so comfortable crossing my legs. So I moved from Italy a couple of years ago, and their tables have, the bottoms of them are always so extended. I'm so tall. I was never able to fold my legs and fit under the table neatly. This is actually really good. For me, it makes a difference. This first form is actually accepting. Now, this is a partial skeleton. In order for us to have the burial, which I know that we want to proceed with, then to make it official, you have to officially accept the remains as being partial. Now, on the additional side, the second step of that is in the future, if we find additional remains, and maybe that's not your generation, maybe that's the next generation, but you can tell me and we'll document it that you want the family to be notified.
Okay, I was wondering if they would ever find more someday.
We're still looking, yes, because of the circumstances of the common graves.
So there could be more.
There could be. It's really hard to say. It's probably 50-50 at this point. But today, with actually noting what the family's wishes are, then we'll know in the future. Maybe that's 15 years from now. Maybe it's 20. We'll reach out to the family to make sure you have that news. Sometimes families don't want to go through this again. We don't do the military honors again, but we still will bring him home, pay to open the grave, place the remains there in the grave with the original burial. But some families don't want to go through all of those steps again, and so they'll tell us no, and we will actually coordinate with the Navy to do a burial at sea in those cases.
Now, will this come in a casket?
So we're going to get to that.
Okay.
That's definitely an option because you told me early on that was important. So what are your thoughts? Now I know that you do want to accept the remains because we're going to have the burial for him, correct?
Yes.
So I'm going to get your initials right there.
Right there?
Right there. Did I give you the bad pen? Now the second part of that, as I mentioned, notifying the family if we do find additional remains in the future. How do you feel about that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So then I'll get your initials right there again. Now, if it happens in the future, once we make notification, you can still decide. I don't want to go through those
We
steps.
answer phone calls.
Okay. And I'm going to put a special asterisk next to your name. You can always decide later that you want to do a burial at sea. That's something that we can still coordinate for the family.
Garbage truck.
Oh, I was like, what's that
You'll
noise?
sign here. You're what we call the person authorized to direct disposition, the PAD.
And that's just the Army term for who's responsible for planning his services. So.
I'll get your signature right there.
Okay.
Must be trash day.
Yep. Garbage truck, he's a
I'm
little
gonna
noisy.
witness it for you.
And there's no barking.
Not yet.
It's really exciting when the garbage truck comes to our house.
So here's where we actually decide the funeral home, the cemetery, which you've already done obviously early on. So I've pre-filled with Woodlawn Cemetery there in Plymouth. For burial honors, I've also gone ahead and pre-filled that. We do both pallbearers for his arrival in Nebraska. We have Plainside Honors, which is an honorable from the time that he arrives all the way to the funeral home. That's where we see the veteran service organizations want to play a role in the escort of that. So from Rolling Thunder Motorcycle Group to, you mentioned the Legion, if they have their own, we start to see these local support mechanisms come into play. It's pretty cool. So you guys will definitely want to be there for his arrival. Now, one of the things that I don't have a say in it, I don't own this part of the process, is when exactly and where exactly he arrives in Nebraska. So we have a big Army mortuary contract, and so they're the ones that are going to book his travel from Hawaii to Nebraska. Typically, coming out of Hawaii, it's going to be 2 days before the interment, so that kind of, I feel pretty solid as far as planning when it comes to getting you to Nebraska. We have you there in place prior to his arrival. Does that make sense? So if you choose the 13th of July for his interment, and he's going to arrive on the 11th of July, then you'll want to be there on the 10th of July so that you can be there for his arrival. You'll actually get to be there on the tarmac at the airport for that arrival. So it'll be a big deal. We're going to leave with you one document. We officially will pay for 3, yourself and 2 other family members, to travel to Nebraska. So we pay the flights. You will book hotel. We'll pay for 2 nights hotel. You pay up front, keep the receipt, and we'll file a voucher to reimburse you. You get daily per diem for your meals. You'll have the casualty officer there in Nebraska to assist with transportation once you get to the state. We're asking for information up front just because we've put you on official military orders to give you the official capacity. You get a special room rate at the hotel, all of those things. Do you have the family worksheet?
Yes, I do.
I think we're driving.
Are you going to? We'll pay your mileage. You don't want to miss
Yes,
this.
we'll go to Cheyenne and pick up Austin
Great.
and travel with his family. I don't know if...
Well, it would probably be easier to drive to. Trying to fly from here to
It's hard.
Podunk, Nebraska is,
Connect in
yeah.
Denver.
How far is
Miles,
Plymouth
unfortunately,
from
is not
Cheyenne?
going to be able to
I'm
It's
sorry.
probably about an 18-hour, 16, 18-hour drive from here. Yeah.
But he's teaching
It's about 6.5
summer
hours
school
from
out
Cheyenne to
there, and he's
Plymouth.
got
Okay,
About 6
couple other
hours from
things
Cody to
going on, and
Cheyenne.
he said, I
Gotcha.
just can't
Okay.
okay,
so
thank you.
sorry.
get away.
Not quite as far. Yeah, you are still.
I feel bad about that, but I know Austin's
Yeah,
going
sorry, I
to
have to
go
keep
away.
talking to
Is there
people, so
any-
I'm put myself on mute.
break
Okay.
in his summer schedule as far as
Yeah, I was
planning the
hoping we hadn't
dates?
lost you.
I don't know.
I missed a lot, so I'll have to go back and listen to it later. But
Maybe.
I'm videotaping it too, so I'll put it out on Google or on YouTube or something.
okay.
So, ma'am, what Tamala was saying is before we leave this morning, I am going to ask you for some personal information, like your social security number.
We're going to leave this with you.
Yep. As well as it also has information here for your bank information. And that's just so that we can set that payment up ahead of time so that you can be reimbursed by the Army once you complete travel. Okay? So when you're looking at this and you... What's that?
He said we didn't expect that.
Yes.
It's important that you're able to go and be there. So if us being able to help get you and your family there, that's the least we can do. So, but when you're looking at this paperwork and seeing that banking information, that's why it's on there, so that we can reimburse you for that travel when the time comes.
Okay.
Okay.
And the main reason we leave it versus, we've flooded you with information. We don't want to make this complicated. You know up front that for the 2 additional family members that we're going to pay for, even if it's mileage, that we're going to need their social and their bank information because we put all 3 people on orders. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, decisions as far as casket or cremation is an option, but you had mentioned early on that casket was going to be important.
Well,
Well, for as much remains as there are,
Didn't really know how much would they find. If you just find a finger bone, do you need a big casket? I think I
It's
talked
really
to you
just a
about that.
preference.
I don't know.
We would absolutely cover, for us, there's, it's just a matter of really what the family decides. When they prepare him in Hawaii, so they will, the Army will have a representative go to the lab, verify that it's him, and he'll be taken to a local funeral home. He's wrapped in an Army wool blanket as per regulation. They will as well in Hawaii prepare his uniform with all of his awards and place the uniform there in the casket over the remains. So when he gets to Nebraska, the casualty officer and the military escort there, their job is to make sure everything is presentable. If you wanted to see the uniform in the casket, you could.
So this is something I have a little bit of experience with. We did in a similar case to yours, we did another repatriated soldier up in Sheridan several years ago, and it looks exactly like this picture. This is accurate, and they actually did. It sounds odd because they only found a few of his remains, not to the extent that they found Irwin. They just found a few bones as a very small package, more or less. But they actually had a viewing at the funeral home where they had more or less an open casket with the service member's remains underneath in that small package, and then the uniform laid on top. So if that's something, I don't know religiously what's important to you and your family, but if you wanted to have an open casket or a viewing, that's absolutely possible. So
Really, I think that's kind of cool though, because I mean, why go
That's
to all the
cool,
trouble
though.
of that if you're not going to see it?
Yeah,
I mean, and like me, I want to see the bones, but
I think take the couple of photos that you have and perhaps get them blown up and have it on display. So this is going to be big for the town. So I anticipate
I think there should be a lot of people there.
right.
I think you should do
I would
this.
agree.
Yeah. Well, hi.
But again,
yeah, I
you
think
don't
that
have to
I think that
decide
would be
that
cool.
Yeah.
There's time.
right now.
Just know this is available.
Okay.
So that will come later. What we're deciding on today is options between a wood casket and a metal casket. Now, I mentioned to you early on that you're deciding on the funeral home. Good job, because you already know them. I'm so excited. But you're going to actually have a contract with them, and then we're going to follow up and reimburse. So part of your contract, when you're thinking about your choices, the casket is something we pay for in advance. So you have a $9,000 budget to consider for interment, but the casket is outside of that because we're paying for that. Typically, you're deciding things like secondary flowers, an obituary. If you wanted to have the interment or the service recorded, any type of media package, oftentimes funeral homes will assist with that. Does that make sense?
Oh,
That's going to
yeah,
come
kind of
later.
overwhelming.
That's going to come later. Just I want to touch on those topics. I don't expect you to remember every single detail, like Travis said. That's why we're here. So we'll go over it again. But we are deciding today between the metal and the wood casket.
I think that
I like that.
18 gauge steel is pretty sweet.
Okay.
Wood?
Metal.
No, the steel.
Sorry, Austin.
Snap that.
She's saying this one.
Stand up.
Ma'am, if you want, you can take this and maybe push it up against the bottom of that screen, and that
Yeah, just keep sliding down.
Are you partial to the wood?
Mom likes wood, but for somebody in rural
Yeah.
like you, don't you think steel is?
I don't know. What do you think?
Everybody has a vote. Do you like steel? Do you like steel? Cat, you like steel?
I
Steel
guess
it
I'm
is.
outvoted. Austin, wood, or steel?
He's busy.
I can't see the difference, so steel sounds
Oh.
good to me.
Here,
Okay, I'm
there's
outvoted.
steel. And there's wood.
Steel looks good.
You are outvoted.
Okay.
I am outvoted.
At the end of the day,
It's your signature.
choice. It's your choice. Well,
Well,
If you like wood, go with the wood.
Either one is fine. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah, I doubt
you
that.
don't think you'll
I
care.
doubt that
I don't think
care.
he'll care.
Okay,
I think either one's an improvement over a rice paddy.
That's
It'll
I
be
right.
prefer
okay.
wood, but if everybody's going for steel, we'll do steel.
Is that your final answer? Because we can go with wood. You're the person signing this document.
Don't
You're,
say that to her. You'll put her in the spin on us.
Let's see.
She won't be able to decide.
He has trouble with decisions. That's it.
That's why I asked y'all.
going with the consensus.
Don't ask
Yeah.
if you don't want to know.
Sign a paper.
Well, it's too late now. I already asked. Okay, let's do metal. But they probably had wood back in World War II.
Yeah, I think they did. They
I
grew
know they
trees
did
back
when he
then.
was growing up. Okay, where is?
Metal?
Yeah.
I don't feel like. Okay, so casketed burial, private cemetery, $9,000 budget. I'm going to get your initials right there.
And that's kind of
I'm
the
gonna
key
throw
part.
that pen
If
away.
if you wouldn't mind helping her remember that is that
Okay, I've
the,
got one of
the
these.
casket does not go towards that $9,000. So the Army will reimburse up to $9,000 with the funeral home. If it goes
This
over
needs to get
that
sorted.
9,000, that 9,000 is what we're capped at. So
What is the name of the funeral home?
Fox Funeral.
And that's there in Plymouth?
It's in Beatrice. It's about 20 miles away.
You even have the address.
My cousin was very helpful.
Thank goodness for her. Thank
Thanks,
goodness.
Kay.
You know, another thing that you asked about the American Legion post earlier, I can't speak on behalf of Nebraska, but my job here within the state of Wyoming is military funeral honors, so I do have a little bit of knowledge on that. Just about, I can't think of a single funeral home here in Wyoming that doesn't contact the local American Legion, VFW, Patriot Guard Riders the moment they get a veteran.
Oh, cool.
You know, I can't guarantee you that's going to be the case with Fox Funeral Home as well, but I have a
Probably.
pretty good feeling that,
The
that they're
Legion's
going to
named
know.
after those three boys.
They will.
Yeah.
Trust me on this.
So when you talk with Fox Funeral Home, it might be a good idea to ask them if they notify the American Legion. But I have a pretty good feeling that they're already going to be doing that the moment you get done with your request.
I've worked on hundreds of cases and I have yet to see that those local veteran organizations,
That's
they
cool.
call me, they call the funeral home, they always participate every single time.
I'm glad.
Me too. Now, signature right there. We'll make this official. Right there.
Okay, is this the one that worked?
Yes.
Right there?
Right here. Almost there. This next form is the official media release. So here's where we actually identify the local media outlets, either in Nebraska or local here in Cody. I think you should consider putting information out here in Wyoming as well, because you're here, and to see it on the evening news or reading in the paper is a big deal. Oftentimes what happens, based on the release out of DC, this is where, because the release will include information on the service member, include the photo that you guys are going to share with me, So all the info leading up to the ID, kind of hard to see, but it's got this contact the Army, and here's our 800 number, and that's where I start. I talk to every single person who calls and wants to get further information. So he's from Plymouth. We automatically send the story to Plymouth Media, but we can expand from there.
I think they probably have just a weekly paper.
That makes sense.
Give her the
Just
give her the information. That lady that's been in contact.
Definitely.
The paper back there. She needs that.
Definitely.
I think we should put it in the PAL paper.
Which one is that?
And the Cody. Cody
The
would,
PAL Tribune.
and the
PAL?
POWELL.
Cody too.
Is it Powell Tribune?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm
Yes.
hard of hearing too.
I'd probably mumble.
And Cody.
Cody Enterprise. If we wanted on the evening news, you could send it to Billings too.
Do you know their call sign?
Well, there's two. There's KULR and
KULR.
KULR
Color 8.
And here's the
And,
one that's in the Fairbury paper in
KTVQ.
Nebraska.
KTVQ is the
This
other one.
lady that I
KTBQ.
said they called and she
KTVQ.
really wants to help. And she already
Those
turned it
based
in.
out of where?
to the
Billings,
Fairbury paper.
Montana.
Billings.
She missed the Plymouth paper.
Oh yeah,
But
Cowboy
this is
State
just
Daily. That would
that
be
he's been
really
found,
good.
so that'll
Cowboy
be-
State Daily is a big one.
And they would be
everything's-
all over that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cowboy.
Cowboy State Daily. You might get an interview with Wendy.
And this one.
Wendy Core lives here, so she.
Okay.
You watch Cowboy State Daily?
From time to time, yes.
Fairbury.
Fairbury, Nebraska. Fairbury.
Journal News.
Journal. Okay.
Any others? We can certainly add too.
That's a lot.
Trust me, if after this release leaves DC, if you Google his name, well, you can already see it,
K2,
but it's
is
just
it?
going to be more and
K2,
more.
and
It's
then
going to be really
the
cool.
Casper Star Tribune.
When these entities reach out to me, and
Yeah,
sometimes they
K2
ask
is
to
kinda
speak to the family,
big
are
one.
you okay with that?
Yeah,
I don't share your
that's where I'm at,
information.
yeah.
I take theirs and share it with you.
Our streaming switches back
Or
and
you
forth
can
all the time. Like
appoint another
sometimes
family member to speak
we'll
to
get
media.
KLR, and other times we'll get K2 out of Casper. And what?
Speak to media.
Yeah, they just volunteered you. You're right.
Oh, great.
Usually it's along the lines of, what
If
was
they
your
need to go and talk to
experience?
them.
And can you
I
tell
wonder
me
what they would want to know.
Kathy has a lot
maybe
of knowledge.
him growing up in Nebraska, or information on the family, or really it's about what this means to you now, like this whole process. So it's all good publicity. Did you officially appoint her?
Mom could go with her.
Usually it's just a matter of, they call me and I'll reach out just to make sure that it's okay and share their information. So you can call them back if you want to. You don't have to at all.
If you want to go with me,
Okay.
hold my hand.
All right, so initials here. And we'll take it case by case.
I don't know about that one.
Signature there. Good pups.
Very good.
They're quiet.
They're really quiet today. They're not. They're not usually.
Now this next form, it's really, really important, your privacy. So from day one, I've never shared your information and I never will. But in order to even share the service information for him in Nebraska, you have to bless off on it. So are you okay with me releasing the date, time, location for the service to?
Oh, certainly.
Yeah. So I'll
I
get
think
your-
there's going to be a lot of people that will want to come.
I see.
We've got second cousins and
Yeah, there's a lot of relatives in
several
Nebraska.
relatives.
So
It's gonna be like
around.
a family reunion for you guys.
it will.
It will be. We probably won't
Super
get back
cool.
there again.
Make the most of it, really.
You know, and it sounds like Plymouth is a pretty small town.
Yeah, it is.
You know, I talked earlier about that repatriation for a similar soldier in Sheridan several years back. Depending on how
Here's
the
the
community
stone
of Plymouth is, when that
So this
happened
will
over in
change
Sheridan, it was just a
From
2 or 3 day
in-memory, it will now,
Americana
of course,
fever
be
dream.
a
You know, the whole
burial
town turned
headstone.
out. They had the
Okay, and I
whole
was wondering,
main street
will they
decked
change
out
that?
in
And if
red,
so,
white,
how
and
will they
blue,
do
and
that?
a huge
Usually what they
procession.
they
Like they
don't
turned it into a
typically
parade
change
to
out
bring
the
home. It was
entire
Or they just
thing.
put
3
a-
mile long.
A symbol
So
or
I mean, I
something
don't
on there?
know if
No,
Plymouth will be
they're-
like that, but I think there's
So
a pretty,
the actual method
pretty
that
good
they use,
chance
the
that
funeral home
It
will be
might,
able to
as you were
answer,
suspecting, it's going to
but they're
get big
able to just do
quickly,
a re
as long as you want it that way.
and change that
you
in
know.
memory portion, so that goes away, and this is
Whatever they want to
ultimately,
do there is,
you know,
yeah.
his marker.
So just be
Because
aware.
he's
I
buried
think
there.
it could get
Okay, and then the
large in a
MIA
hurry,
will be
especially if
will go away
Plymouth is a
too.
pretty patriotic
Yes.
small town.
Okay.
You know.
So on
Yeah.
that end, the funeral home will know what to do to request from the VA, but we also have a casualty officer that's going to assist you there in Nebraska. And for repatriation, the VA likes to have all of this done prior to interment. So they're going to start working on that fairly immediately as soon as we
That's good.
get the ball rolling.
You have a before and after photo.
Yeah.
Years ago, Miles, the one in California, and I got to talking and wondered what Bud did in the service. And I wrote to several military places, the Army, and they said records had been burned.
In 1980s.
So there was very little information. And Wayne said, why don't you write to that little American Legion back in Plymouth? Because it's named after them. So I did, and I got, probably about a week later, a letter from the nicest man, Herman Frazee, back there, and I said, does Irwin have a stone? And he said, no, he does not. Can we get one for him? And he said, you have to order it, but he said, I
He'll
will help you. And he was great, and he and his son picked it up at the depot and put it down into the set it down in concrete, and
Those are good people.
he was so kind. And his wife is she's in Lincoln. She fell and broke her neck, and so she's in a kind of retirement home or something.
That's hard to
But
recover.
she said, I want to know when the funeral is. I'm coming. So my boys will bring me. So anyway, we went back there in Memorial Day 2005, and they did a ceremony for him with the gun salute and the flag.
He is a local boy. That's
And I have that flag.
Do you?
Should I go get the box?
And the Legion did that. The Legion Club did that.
Okay.
It was very nice.
Go get the box. Careful, because it might fall apart.
this means a lot to them. You know, so that's wonderful. There's good people.
But I'm
Absolutely.
thinking now, do I accept the flag?
You
So,
Do I have to?
No, if you want it to be presented, that's one of the questions that the casualty officer on that end is going to work with you on.
The reason I wondered is because I accepted the flag the first time for Bud.
Understood.
Well,
Well,
is
if-
somebody else could do it
Yeah.
too.
And then
Well,
you'll
It
have
doesn't seem right for me to do it again because I already have a flag. I have that.
If John comes,
Yes.
maybe
and
he
I was
would want
thinking
it
about
because
John
he's the
Miller.
one that
and
put the
you can
gave the
absolutely do that.
DNA.
That'll just be a conversation
Yeah.
with
Because
that
obviously-
casualty
Because
officer.
I mean, they're all cousins.
We'll decide that
yeah.
later.
He's the one that
I think that's
that
appropriate.
decided it. But he's the only male cousin that I have left. He's a World War II reenactor.
It's going to mean
Oh,
a
wow.
lot to him.
And I think it would be very special to him. I haven't told him. about it.
I think as long as that's what you want, I think that'd be very fitting and very,
Well,
very kind of you. To
I
your
don't think
family,
it's
yeah.
right if I do it again.
Well, know that at the end of the day, it's 100% your choice. But
And it's his uncle too.
Wow.
Oh wow! Look
So
at that!
great.
Wow.
That's really special.
So Herman, the Legion did the flag, or the ceremony, and Herman gave me the flag. And then I've got the telegram in there that Grandma got when he
And
was gone,
notified.
and Douglas MacArthur. And
That's
Wow.
really, really
But
unique.
this lady in Nebraska said that there was a picture of Irwin in the little community center in Plymouth in his uniform. And I said, I don't remember ever seeing it. Either I saw it and don't remember, or it's gone, because my cousin said that there was another picture there, and she said, I don't know where it went, but it's missing.
Well, that's an incredible display.
It is.
That's
So I just
how
think
special.
with that, it's not right for me to do it again.
Well, know that it's 100% up to you. But if you would like John to have that, that's something that you can
I think it
coordinate.
would mean a lot to him.
Yep. And what I would say
Well, with his
is let-
DNA, so
Yeah, it was his
Right,
DNA that
yeah.
decided it.
once you get closer to the funeral and when you're planning out, kind of the smaller details of what does the service look like, relay that to the funeral home, and they'll relay that to the military funeral honors team. And also when you get to Nebraska and you're there with that other soldier who's taking care of you in Nebraska, just make sure to reiterate that to them, and they will make sure that flag goes to whoever you want it to be.
Should I tell him beforehand?
No,
No.
let it be a surprise. I think that would
It'll
mean
be a
so
surprise.
much to him.
I'm sure. I've thought about it, and I thought, yeah, it'd be cool, because but that was his funeral at that time.
Yeah.
That's what we did. And I've got the flag.
Now we're going to provide you with a flag case. It's big enough for the flag. It has a back black felt where you can add additional items to it. That's something that will be delivered to you later. So we couldn't coordinate it to send it to John. That's something that would have to be worked out.
That being said, if you're traveling through Cheyenne to get down to Nebraska, we can absolutely arrange for a way
Pick up.
to meet up or pick that up so that it can go with you to the funeral and it is
That's
ready
a great
for the
idea.
service.
Okay.
So
Because we're going
Well,
with
and yeah, and Austin
travel
lives
with them.
there
They
too,
said
so he can
if
always
the
pick
funeral
stuff
is
up.
in
That's
July,
great.
they can go. And John is coming down, but he said if the funeral is the first 2 weeks in August, I can't make it, so we can't do it then.
Too easy. We'll be ready to support no matter what. Now, I know that you're okay with these third parties having the service information. I feel pretty confident for members of Congress or any political affiliation because you've got the state senator.
He's coming. He's
gonna-
planning something.
I want to make it official. I will get your initials here first, right there.
Is that the pen I had before?
We changed it out.
Oh,
And then right
okay.
there.
she's keeping you on your toes. She keeps swapping it out on you.
Right there. Signature right there. Making me sign all kinds of things. We're
Yes.
almost done. Almost done.
Buying their house.
Sounds like a government operation.
It
doesn't
totally is.
We like our paperwork. Yeah.
Yes, we do.
I'm just enough of a rebel to use blue ink. Technically, it's part of the regulation.
I like blue.
Blue is nice because you can tell which one's the original.
That's
Right.
right.
Yes.
Final document.
But the military doesn't like blue ink.
So I talked a bit ago about airport and then the date that he arrives.
Bankers like
I
blue
won't get the
ink.
flight itinerary until 10 days before the service. I'm going to share that with Travis and the casualty officer in Nebraska, who are going to share it with the funeral home so that they'll be ready to go and pick him up from the airport.
So we'll know
You'll know well in advance.
when in advance.
In
Okay.
your case, because he's coming from Hawaii, and they always ship 2 days before. So I'm extremely confident that he's going to arrive within that 2-day window. but it's all things commercial. So when the military escort comes online, he's leaving, could be American Airlines, connecting all the way to Nebraska.
Now, who was it that we know that was late to their own funeral?
Oh no. Oh no, not you.
Her funeral hasn't happened yet. Dad, who was it that we know that was late to their own funeral?
Oh, it'll be me.
It'll be her.
She
Yeah.
will.
I don't remember.
She's late for everything.
Anyway, we do.
I've been told that a lot of times.
So I'm asking one additional time, just a yes or no circle in this case, to be sure you're okay with me or my team sharing the specific date for his service,
Certainly.
because we get a lot of public calls. So circle yes there. This next question is specific. If you've got family in Nebraska that you've just lost contact with, but they read about it in the paper and they contact the Army and want to talk to the family, they're asking specifically to reach out to you personally. I'm more comfortable because I don't go through any screening process to determine that they're being honest when they call. I can't really do that. So I'm inclined to ask you to say no. And then case by case, when people reach out, then I can share their contact information with you and you can decide, versus me sharing your information with them.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Just
if you
to
give
keep it-
her
Right.
say so and so called and
No.
yeah.
I would say no.
Okay.
And that way we can keep you nice and private. And then this last one is where DPAA sends a little individual POW MIA flag to the cemetery. This will be after the interment, most likely. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
It's fitting in this case.
Certainly.
And then final signature and you're done.
You're sure.
You're officially in the Army.
Yeah, what are you signing? For a listener paper?
Oops.
Yeah.
Congrats, you shipped out in a couple weeks.
Matthew says 1 T. Kids always get upset. Well, I do too, because people put 2 T's in them. Quit talking, I'll put 2 T's in that. Okay.
So
Oh, my
we're
dad
gonna
always said.
transition,
So
I
Grandma
think, to
said
the
too.
best part.
So, part of this is that over his military career, Irwin earned several awards, and this is both while he was living, and then also he was presented with some posthumous awards once he died, after he died. And we do have all of those awards right here, and as his closest family, we'd like to present those to you at this time. Are you ready to do that, or would you like to take a little break first?
That's very cool.
It's
Yeah.
very cool.
She's ready.
We get those?
Yes, ma'am. They're yours. So what I have here, and I do have a couple of these packets. I was not as prepared as Tamala, and I did not print out as many copies as I should have. But I would be happy to get you more copies. But what I have here is this document shows all of the awards that Irwin was.
As long as we have them, we're good.
He had
Yeah.
a Purple Heart.
Yep. And so what we'll do,
Somebody told me, and
so
nobody knows where it is.
what we'll do is, I don't know how familiar you and your family are with military awards,
Not
but
very.
what I'd like to do is I'd like to go through each one of his medals and explain what they were awarded for, and then we'll be ready to present those to you and your family.
My dad had the Asiatic Pacific Campaign, World War II victory. He
Lot
had
of
3
similar.
medals.
Yeah.
There's a yellow one, a red one, and a blue one.
Well, I think you're probably about to see some of those same
Right.
ones.
I
So,
think.
the first award that I'd like to start off with is the Bronze Star. He was awarded the Bronze Star, which is a pretty significant award. The Bronze Star is awarded for an individual distinguishing themselves through heroic and distinguished action, and it's not awarded lightly. So it is a significant award, and it has to be in connection with military operations with a foreign enemy. So it is a like I said, a rather prestigious wartime award. And so what we have here is these are the actual award documents, and it has his different orders for receiving these awards, as well as the actual award memo, the award paper here. So this is for his Bronze Star. So Karen, I'm going to give that to you. And you can read, each one of these awards have a small citation here that say, you know, why, how did he receive this, why did he receive this, and so that's located right there.
Okay.
And then, so this is his Bronze Star. So this is for you and your family. And so you have the actual medal, which would have been worn in like their formal dress uniform. And then you have the ribbon, which would have been worn in their service uniform, like I wear here. And then you have a lapel pin here that you can wear on civilian clothes outside the uniform. So all three of those are present. And if you look on this, it actually does have his name on this, because these were personal awards. His personal actions resulted in these awards. They are engraved with his name.
Cool.
It is.
So I'll put this back in its case. Yes, ma'am.
Want to set them up here or pass it around?
I was pretty impressed with that display you had of his flag. I don't know if you'd want to add these
Yeah, I
to
think
those,
you
but
should.
I think that'd be really fitting.
Yeah.
Seeing as how you already have a way to honor his memory,
That's a
I
good
think
idea.
these would be
Thank
a
you
great
for the
addition.
suggestion.
Yeah. So then the next award I have here is he did earn a Purple Heart for being wounded or killed by actions of the enemy. So this was a posthumous award because he did die in captivity. And so with that, again, here is the citation awarding that to Irwin. So I'll give that to you to review. And the Purple Heart has kind of an interesting story. It was actually, it's actually our military's oldest medal, and it was commissioned by General Washington during the Revolutionary War. Only 3 soldiers received it during the Revolutionary War because at that time it was awarded for merit, and then it went away for some time. And then in 1917, and then afterwards, we start seeing it in modern times, being World War II, and it was backdated to anybody serving after 1917. So that's when we start to see it for the periods of World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and on to current conflicts. So I've always found the history of it kind of interesting, but again, so that's his medal, and because this is another personal award, you'll see that his name is engraved on the back. So.
I'll have to read these.
Didn't bring my glasses.
She's been
Did
talking
good up
about.
to this point.
She's been talking about this one for a while.
It's a big deal.
That's a lot, and he
deserves that.
earned these,
Yeah.
absolutely. Ma'am, I know this isn't my house, but can I get you a glass of water or anything? Is there?
No, I'm okay. Oh, okay. Actually, we had a pitcher of water we were going to put out, and
We just jumped right in.
some cinnamon rolls, and
We jumped right in.
No, thank
I'm
you,
good,
but
thank you.
no.
you did all the
We'll
talking.
give you a
didn't
homemade cinnamon
I
roll.
travel
Probably
with
would,
water.
What's that?
We'll give you a homemade cinnamon roll.
You're too kind. But that's okay.
She made them yesterday.
They weren't bad.
It's got his
last
name
night.
on the back
I
of
believe
it.
it. I
How
have
many
no
did
doubt.
you eat?
Did I eat? Half of one.
Oh, that's pretty good.
It was late.
Now these.
I've never
so
seen a Purple Heart before.
I've never
that's
seen.
his, and it's
Yeah.
yours now.
Pictures, but not.
Real thing.
So these next awards, these are all, whereas in the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star are Irwin's medals, and these are as well, but these are awarded for different actions.
She really wants to
doesn't
talk
give
to
up.
you.
That's
No,
okay.
she doesn't.
These are awarded for different actions, campaigns, or different things that Irwin was a part of, not necessarily due to his
So the
personal
unit.
actions.
Kind of award.
Well, not quite a unit award because those are different, but these are specifically based on campaigns or circumstances
Okay.
related to Irwin that qualified him for these. So the first one I have here is the Prisoner of War medal, and this, of course, is because Irwin was a prisoner of war of the Japanese, and so this shows that he did spend time as a prisoner of war, and this is still awarded to this day to all members who are ever in captivity of a foreign hostile power. So there's his prisoner of war medal. And these ones don't come with a lapel pin like the Bronze Star and Purple Heart, but they still have the ribbon and the medal.
They're all beautiful medals.
Why don't they have a lapel pin?
Usually the lapel pins, again, are for personal actions. So like if it was an Army Achievement Medal, Army Commendation Medal,
Never knew we
Bronze
got
Star,
those.
actions that individual personally did. Whereas with these where it's a circumstance related thing, they usually don't have lapel pins for those awards. The next one we have here is the Army Good Conduct Medal. And this is for individuals who serve their contract or their term more or less in good standing with the Army. So it indicates that he wasn't a troublemaker.
He was a good
Yeah,
guy.
he wasn't, thrown in the brig for whatever reason. This indicates that he served our country honorably and well. And so this is
POW.
This is it's a big deal just because very few people serve in the Army to begin with. This shows that he was not only a soldier, but he was a good soldier, and that the Army valued his proficiency and his ability to conduct himself as a soldier. So this is also it's a testament to his character.
That's nice. I didn't know they gave anything like that either.
And again, just like the POW medal, that's an award that they still award today. So.
Something great.
My dad and his two brothers were Navy, and the other one went with the Army.
Sounds
They
like.
had all bases covered.
The Navy one came back.
Would you like me to put these back in this cardboard box, or would you prefer I just leave them out on the table?
I'll look at them again in
Yes, ma'am.
a little bit and read the
So,
information.
if you'd like to turn the page on that award document I have here, so now we're going to start getting into his campaign awards. So different military actions that he was a part of. Okay. And the first one here is we do have an American Defense Service Medal, and this is specifically for soldiers who enlisted or were drafted in defense of the United States during World War II. Okay, Irwin is specific on this one. You'll notice there's a couple different clasps and devices on this ribbon and medal, and the reasoning for that is because any soldier who served during World War II was awarded this ribbon. Irwin is specific because he saw foreign service. So this clasp here on the ribbon indicates that he not only was a soldier, but he was deployed outside of the United States in a foreign soil in pursuit of American interests, in pursuit of the United States Army's intentions. So that's why it has this extra clasp on there. And then you can't put a clasp on the ribbon. So for the ribbon, that's what that bronze star indicates, is that same clasp there. Okay, so I'll give that to you. So now the next one I have here, which it looks very similar, it's also a yellow ribbon, but it is different. So this is an Asiatic and Pacific Campaign Medal. So this indicates that Irwin was part of the Pacific Campaign, versus the European or North African theaters. This is specific to soldiers serving, in Luzon, in the Philippines.
My dad was in New Guinea.
So I'm sure he has one of these as well. So
It's in my cedar chest.
wow.
That one I recognize that one.
Well, and again, we have an instance here where Irwin does have a special denotation here, in that, again, we have a bronze star device, and that indicates that he was awarded this medal twice, which shows that he was part of more than one campaign. And do you know what the history is on that, Tamala? Do you know if he was anywhere before going to Luzon? Or?
No, he went straight to the Philippines. But I
Okay.
believe there were actually 2 campaigns specifically to the Philippines, though, that would have applied to him just on the date range.
So that's why there's that star, is it indicates more than one campaign that he was part of. So he was a part of more than one major action by the United States Army. So
She doesn't give up.
she cares about
Really
you.
wants
She
to
just
talk
wants to know.
Yeah, my dad was over there only about 6 months. He shattered his knee and
Oh wow.
spent the rest of the time in the hospital until the war was over.
Thank
That's
goodness
still
he made it home.
He was on the water purification department and he fell, shattered his knee.
So then the next award I have here is the World War II Victory Medal. So this was awarded to any individual that was part of America's wartime military during the conflict of World War II. So obviously, by the time victory came, Irwin had already passed. But because he was part of the military in that action, and he helped defend Bataan, he helped defend the island. His actions directly resulted in that victory, and so even though he had died by that time, he was still posthumously awarded this because his actions had a direct.
Would he have received these medals? I wonder if my grandmother
No.
would have.
No,
He-
because
she would not have had those.
this was awarded, this wasn't awarded till
Okay, well-
World War II is over and won.
That one, but like I was thinking, like these other two.
She would have received the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star. Those would have posthumously.
I wonder whatever became of them.
I think I've only seen maybe 3 total when I've met with families. They just,
They get lost.
One person thinks they're important and doesn't share, and they're gone.
I can't think she would have sold them. This Herman that helped me with the stone. he
They
said
probably
no,
got
he would have
lost after
earned
she
the
died
Purple Heart.
somewhere.
Who knows who was in her home?
Really?
Yeah, but who knows? If she moved, if it just the chaos of losing a son. That they're at the end of the day, they're pretty small pieces. Who knows what could have happened to
I
them?
asked a couple of my cousins, and one of them said they had seen it. He said, I don't know whatever became of it.
He goes, oh, Mom.
So I don't know if she would have sold it.
And that's
She
really
had
Yeah.
nothing.
That's not the-
somewhere.
that's the main reason that we reissue them now is because we don't really meet families that have that existing medal. So it's a really important part of this process.
I didn't ever think that. Well, I never thought that he would have any.
Yeah.
Just never thought about it.
It goes
He
on.
has. If you look at uniforms of soldiers during the Second World War, we typically as a military have a lot more ribbons and awards nowadays than they did back at that time. You look at a lot of pictures, even very well decorated, very well known soldiers from World War II, and they don't, there's a handful of ribbons on their uniforms, and here we are looking at Irwin's awards, and he's got, just looking at the ones I've given you so far, he's got 7, or he was recognized. It's very clear just by the amount here that he was something special, that to have that many awards for that period of time is rare. So that's something to be very proud of.
It's a big deal.
What are your pins that you have there?
Oh,
That's your marksmanship.
so, well, and this is actually, so all of the awards I just gave you would be worn just like my ribbons now. Okay. So those would have gone on his
uniform.
Yeah.
When he comes home.
And so that uniform that will be provided, they will have his medals, his ribbons on there already. You don't need to put those on as a family. That's something that happens prior to him even being flown back to Nebraska.
Oh.
So, but all of the awards that we've just gone over would have been worn like mine on his left chest. And those are personal awards. So that indicates things directly relating to him. He also probably would have had a marksmanship badge similar to what I have, but those records, marksmanship wasn't something that they necessarily kept very good records of. So who knows what that could have been, or even if he ever received a badge for it. The awards we're about to get into now are different unit level awards or foreign country awards. And with unit awards, so those are worn on the right chest. And what those are awarded for is they're not awarded to the individual, they're awarded to the unit for a collective action. And the first one of those, if you go to the 3rd page of that military awards sheet, the first one we're going to talk about is this blue ribbon that's surrounded by a gold wreath. And this is the Presidential Unit Citation. And so this is an award that's authorized by the president, specifically to units that show exceptionally heroic or distinguished actions. And it's not a common award. There's not a lot of units in the Army that have this. But not only did Irwin's unit have this, his unit was awarded it 3 times.
Big deal.
That's what those bronze oak leaves indicate, is each one is another award. So this is his unit's 3rd award. I don't know the history of how Irwin's unit got that. I don't know if they were recognized in the defense of Luzon. That to me that makes sense given the context. Do you know, Tamala?
So they participated all the way back to World War I. And so it could be between the 2 conflicts, because post World War II they were deactivated.
Yeah. And those units, as Tamala just said, that those awards stay with the unit. So, like, we have certain units, like I was once part of a unit that, like, we still had a presidential unit citation for their actions in the Korean War. And while we weren't part of that, because we were part of that unit, we still wore it. So that could be why Irwin has this as well. But that's that presidential unit citation.
That's cool.
Tamala, are you doing this today? Was that
No, that will be later. Thank you. I've got a flight at 1:30. I'm gonna have to break away.
Oh, it's noon.
It is.
Oh my gosh.
Time flies.
Yes, it does.
If you'd like, I can finish these.
We can keep going. I'm checked in. I don't have any baggage
Okay.
to check, and it's literally 5 minutes down the
And
road.
it's Cody, so the lines are not very
Exactly.
long. You can usually get there about 45 minutes early. Be fine.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you.
So,
Leave at what, 1:30?
1:30.
so the next badge I have here is this is an honorable service lapel pin. These were given out in pin form, and then they also were given out as patches that could be sewn on the soldier's uniform. Its nickname is the ruptured duck because it has a bird on it that doesn't quite look like much anything except for a duck. But what this was awarded for was so after the war, and even during the war, you had soldiers being discharged either due to the reduction in force after the conflict ended, or perhaps they were discharged because they were too injured to continue service for those reasons. And when those soldiers were separated from the military, they were given this badge or a cloth patch of that badge that they would put onto their uniform, and that indicated that they served honorably. And so they could come back to their hometowns and still participate, in the newly formed American Legion, in the VFW, and still wear their uniform. And that this badge indicated that, hey, they weren't dodging anything. They weren't home for whatever reason. It's that they were discharged honorably and that they served their time honorably. And so this is just a further representation of Irwin's honorable service.
Ruptured duck.
Looks like a duck. For sure.
Now, the next award we're going to talk about, we don't have here with us. It's called the Gold Star lapel buttons. So the Gold Star program, the Gold Star families, that's something that's been initiated by the United States government just to help identify families of fallen service members. If you look back during World War I, World War II period, oftentimes families would put up flags on their front doors with blue stars in it, indicating that they had service members in the military. So let's say it was, you said that there were 3 brothers in all and 2 of them served in the Navy, and then Irwin served in the Army.
3 brothers were in the Navy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she had
And Irwin is Army.
So she likely would have had a flag that had 4 blue stars on it, indicating 4 family members serving. Okay. When a soldier is killed or lost, typically one of that star would turn gold. So the gold star indicates a family member who is lost. And so we continue that today with these Gold Star lapel buttons, and that's something that's going to be presented to you as a family member of a fallen soldier. A lot of times that will coincide with the funeral, and will be presented at the funeral, although that's not always the case. That's just where a lot of the times it happens, but we will coordinate with you to present that to you and your family, because that's something that through your family members, that's a cost that you've borne in your loved one no longer being with you and your family. So this is an award that we want to present to you and your family for your family's support and sacrifice to the nation. So, as I said, we'll be in touch and coordinate that presentation with you for a future date. Okay. And then the last award that I have here, this is a Philippine Defense Ribbon. So this is actually an award of the Philippine government. This is not our award as the United States Army. This is the Philippine government. And they awarded this, I apologize, they awarded this to soldiers helping and defend their country from the Japanese invaders during that time. And just as Irwin's other awards, you'll notice there is a Bronze Service Star. And with the Philippine Defense Ribbon, there's a couple different reasons that they may earn that Bronze Service Star, and those are all listed at the bottom. And so one of them was a member that was present with a unit that was actually under enemy fire. If I were to guess, that's why Irwin's has a Bronze Star, because he was actively involved in the defense.
For sure.
So that, to me, I feel like that's a pretty clear correlation as to why he has received that Bronze Service Star on this particular award. So.
Lots of display.
Oh.
And then the last one I have here, and this is Irwin's last award, is he did earn the Philippine Republic Presidential Unit Citation. So similar to the blue Presidential Unit Citation that we presented on behalf of the United States government, the Philippines also had a unit citation on behalf of their president. And you can see a picture of it here at the bottom. We don't have one of those to present to you, but that's another Philippine government award that Irwin was awarded.
We are not able to purchase that award, so that's the main reason that it's not here. But he was entitled to it. He was certainly issued the award.
And so that's those awards tell an incredible story. He was obviously a good soldier, and served his country very, very well. And so we thank you and your family for his service and for yours in following.
He's the only one of my dad's family I hadn't met yet.
You're going to honor him well. Really.
Well, I think the whole family would be happy.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Do you or does anybody have any questions regarding those awards? Is there any more information that you might be curious about that I could try and
ever even
provide you?
think we'd have anything like that. Another shock.
Well, just as everything else, if when you're
Nice to
talking
know.
when you're talking with John this evening, if you have any questions, please give me a call and I'll answer best I can, or I'll get you an answer.
I asked him if he had any, and he couldn't think of any, so I didn't call him back and see if he thought of any.
It'll all be news for him.
And then
Well, it's sure news for me.
so I gave you those different award summaries that show all his decorations. I also have, this is in regards to his funeral services, and what this is an excerpt out of Army Regulation 638-2, which is the Army Mortuary Affairs Program, and it's a giant regulation. You don't want to read through it unless you're trying to go to sleep, but if you're into that, that's great. Why this is important is it does list, as you're working with the funeral home, it lists what we as the Army can reimburse for and what we cannot reimburse for.
Good.
So just, it's not something that you need to address right now, but as you're working with Fox Funeral Home there in Plymouth to decide what you want for a service, I am going to give this to you just so you have an idea of what can and cannot be covered. And there are some there are some different things in here that you might not think of. So like one of the things that sticks out to me is a vocalist. So like if you wanted somebody to sing a song, like the Army can pay for stuff like that. And so,
And a pianist.
yeah, so just food for thought as you're planning the service. Give this a glance so that you know how we can help you and your family in arranging this. And again, have multiple copies
This
of
will
that.
be addressed as we near the date, so don't be overwhelmed. One thing I want to highlight, if you look at this front page, and the casualty officer in Nebraska and Travis will be able to assist. It says casket, but we're paying for it up front, so you don't even have to worry about that. Mostly, you'll want to look at these secondary expenses, obituary, flowers, any vocalist, pianist. Those are really going to be the items that are going to be significant here.
Temporary grave marker, we don't need that.
Right. But know that you're going to get some guidance on the Nebraska side of things as well, just to help you steer and make sure that goes forward
I'm sure this
appropriately.
Melva will give me all kinds of stuff. She's been trying so hard to, you need to talk to them. And I said, well, we're not supposed to talk to them until the people from the Army come.
You did the right thing.
But I think she's really wanting to help. And she has helped too.
But just something to refer back to later. It does cover quite a lot. I don't think you'll have any problems staying within the $9,000. That's gonna be a breeze. I'm gonna stay tuned. The significant things that we have to look towards now is the date. So talk amongst the family, and then go ahead and reach out to the funeral home and let them know that you've decided to use them. And there's going to be an Army representative that will reach out to them to help them along the way as well.
Okay.
That's to be continued. As soon as we have the date, then that's all going to go forward.
She may have talked to Fox already.
Oh my word.
She is on top of it, isn't
That
she?
kind of friend.
Okay.
Yeah.
She and my cousin are good friends, and so when she found out about this, she's really been trying to
Help.
help.
Yeah. Good
And,
intentions, right?
So she notified the paper and did several things, and I'll get to meet her when we get back there.
Good times. It'll be good to have her there.
So going forward, I know you and I already spoke on the phone, but just in case, I wanted to give you my business card.
Okay.
And unfortunately, my number did just change, so the number that's written there is the correct one. I apologize for that being scratched in, but that is correct. You'll always get a hold of me, Ida.
Okay. Thank you.
And please, that's not just for you. If you want to share that with any of your family, you can always reach me at that number. Any of you, if you have any questions whatsoever, please let me know. And I'll either give you the answer, or I'll work with Tamala or the Fort Carson Casualty Assistance Center to find you an answer. Okay, but just know that in terms of any future business with the Army, please reach out to me and don't hesitate, because I'm here to help you and your family. And if there's anything I can do, even if it's just a small question, I'm honored to do so.
You're in good hands.
I'll probably think of some.
I want to hug your neck because I'm going to have to head to the airport. I won't see you again. I don't get to travel to the interment, so I'm going to be behind the scenes.
Well, I wanted to give you a hug. Thank you so much.
It was so great meeting you. I appreciate you.
appreciate all you folks do.
Wonderful lady.
I hope other people do that you're helping.
They do. On a daily basis, I'm just overwhelmed with the family support. You know, families don't have to.
Well,
This is helping us, so
this family is really, really
you're
excited.
in. You're all in.
And it seems like the more things that happen, the more excited
Shall we?
everybody gets. And